Welcome to What's Up Kennisis, our annual or semi-annual webinar. Sometimes we have them in the fall as well. I'm just going to share my screen. Can folks see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about aquatic plants in our lakes, the good, the bad, and the beautiful, because some of them are very good, some of them aren't so good, and many of them are very beautiful. Um, Tonight, the agenda is going to be a little bit of a backgrounder on our What's Up Kinesis webinars. The presenters are Frank Faguli. Frank's going to talk about ULinks a little bit, and ULinks supported us with this project, executed the project for us. And Nick was the lead on the project. And Nick was working with us at ULinks last summer, and now he's the land stewardship manager at HHLT. So welcome, Frank and Nick. We're going to talk a little bit about aquatic plants in our lakes, but specifically about the aquatic plant inventory we did on the Kennisis Lakes last year. At about 7:45, you're welcome to jump in and ask questions. We're not going to put everybody on mute. You're welcome to put questions into the chat as well, and we'll review those and then we'll adjourn. So in 2020, 2021, we did a very extensive survey of the Kennesis Lake residents, members and non-members. And that survey showed that 91% of respondents said that the KLCOA should continue to focus on invasive species prevention, and one of the priorities was education. So this is one of the initiatives around education, but also identifying those invasive species in our lakes and what we can do to try to prevent some from coming in as well. So this is the webinar. I won't go into detail here. I've introduced Nick and Frank and Nick already. And I'm going to hand it over to Frank to do a little bit of an introduction about ULinks and how they supported us on this project. And then I've got a couple of slides and I'll hand it over to Nick to deliver the main part of the presentation tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. So this is just a bit of an overview for some of the folks maybe less familiar with ULink, Center for Community-Based Research as an organization. We were initially and originally one of the many counterparts of the Haliburton County Community Cooperative. And in fact, from 1999 to 2026, that's exactly where we were. This year, we've transitioned underneath the umbrella of what is called the Trent Center for Community-Based Education, or the TCCBE. And this was to achieve fruition in our pursuits towards charitable status designation. But we still are a not-for-profit organization with all of our roots and historic mandates still in place. We operate as a research broker between community partners and post-secondary, senior undergraduate and graduate students to work on 4 credit projects in community-based research. We operate in the cultural, social, economic, business, and environmental sectors, though, in recent years, we've seen a large uptake in our environmental services. But if we flash back 10, 15 years, the even flow has migrated from social sector projects back then to more environmental ones now. We have many academic ties with institutions like Trent, Fleming College, Toronto Metropolitan University, and many others to help get these opportunities on board for students and bring the research goals to fruition. In our longstanding history of doing this, we've seen over 3,000 students complete over 600 research projects, and every single project that gets completed through our office is then made publicly available through our research database found on our website. And one important thing to highlight is these projects aren't ones that are coming from the top down, from the academic side, getting students to identify gaps in the literature or answer academic questions. These are really starting from the ground up at the community level, proposed ideas from individuals like yourselves on this call. And, it really brings knowledge capital to help solve whatever issue you may have that may just be limited by resources, bandwidth, or expertise. Next slide, please. And some of you familiar with ULinks may be very familiar with that model. In fact, we've engaged, the largest amount of engagement that ULinks has seen in a single community partner has been with KLCOA. This past academic year, we just completed 4 additional projects that are either directly or tangentially involved with your association, bringing the mark up to 23 projects hosted by your organization. So it's been just amazing in the opportunities that have been available to students to hone and build up their academic skills through those. This past year, and the reports will be available and are available on our database if you wish to view them. This past year, we did a project on a vacant land inventory along your shoreline. We evaluated different land conservation models that may work for your association. We looked at feasibility of a boat washing station and how that logistically would work in the region that Kennisis Lake is in. And then the fourth one is looking at alternative models for celebrations in cottage country. So looking at feasible opportunities to move away from some of the traditional ones that may have some environmental and other drawbacks. And so I just wanted to sort of open up the opportunity for anybody that would be interested in submitting a project proposal on behalf and in partnership with the KLCOA. I think our services have shown themselves to be, very valuable in terms of accomplishing work that may be outside the scope of ongoing resources. And these projects can support numerous sectors. They do not exclusively need to be in the environmental sector. So looking at ideas that may include environmental monitoring and conservation, could be planning and evaluation within your own organization, could be looking at tackling social issues or opportunities for further community development, or it could even be developing data analysis tools, actually analyzing data sets, developing mapping tools, or any other technology needs. And these are just examples and not confines. So everything above and beyond this mark, we do find opportunities to get students involved and solve your problems 95% of the time with no financial obligation. And then our last, my last slide here sort of ties into what Nick's going to be presenting. In an identified need for more environmental services within Haliburton County, in 2019, ULinks had developed the Woodlands and Waterways EcoWatch Auxiliary Program. And so that has historically had two main branches, water quality monitoring and terrestrial biomonitoring. The former KLCOA is already fully engaged in. You're a participant of our Testing the Waters program, as well as the benthic biomonitoring program. Terrestrial monitoring is looking at forest assessments across the county. And then this tertiary component we've added in this year has brought in capacity to execute fee-for-service projects with respective lake association and municipal clients. So one or two notable ones, we're looking at inducting or establishing hazardous algal bloom reporting frameworks for Haliburton County. And that's a fee-for-service project that we're currently engaged in. And then the aquatic plant inventories that we completed last year with Kennisis, Redstone, Lipsey, and Growler Lake associations. And then we have several planned this summer to continue that work. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Nick Weisblog, who led this initiative last year and really helped us nail down the foundations of what we're able to expand and accomplish. So all of this has been a direct function of Nick's excellent work. So over to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people. I injured my back halfway through. Yeah, or I realized my back was too injured to continue. But yeah. Actually, Jim, could I made some more slides? Could I
I
share
sure
my screen?
can. Yes, I'll stop sharing, Nick, and
Okay.
give it over to I think you should be able to share with Deb. There you go.
Oh,
No
wait,
problem.
hold
That's perfect.
wait. I think I need to do this first. Hooray. Did everybody see this?
Coming. There you go.
Yeah, there we are.
Okay. Also, I like that that image of it's the new license plate for ULinks. Um, yeah, okay, so hello everybody. My name is Nick, and this is a presentation on the survey that we did on the Kennisis Lakes. It should say the Kennisis Lakes. Yeah, I take that correction. Yeah, there are since there are two that we did last year. So getting into the wider context of the project first. So we had a couple of purposes in this project. So the principal one was basically aquatic invasive plant detection and to get a broader survey of the aquatic plant community in the lakes. Um, but it was also to get people more engaged in thinking about aquatic plants in Kennisis as well as on other lakes in Halliburton County. I think one of the it's like I've done aquatic plant surveys for a number of years, working with Eric Sager and Tom Willens, primarily with Eric at Trent. That was where Jim recruited me from. Eric is a board member for Ulinks. And in working with Eric and interacting with lots of people, like cottagers and just people on the lakes doing aquatic invasive plant work, everybody, or a lot of people just refer to everything that's a plant in the lake as a weed. And so, or like seaweed even, which is even, which even sillier, I guess, if you have a sort of general understanding of botany, given that seaweed is an algae. Although we do have aquatic algae that grow in our lakes as well. But anyway, I think point being that just learning about the variety of plants that are in our lakes can help you see things differently. Yeah, I remember doing a project on Cashbog Lake where, yeah, I was doing a presentation on fanwort in that lake, and people were misidentifying things and taking things out thinking it was fanwort when actually it was like certain it's like a na type of native milfoil, broadleaf milfoil looks very similar to fanwort. And there are other things they're taking out, and they're like, oh, I didn't know there's all this stuff in here. Yeah, and so yeah, the a greater ability to distinguish between things can be quite valuable and can help you understand and appreciate the world. Yeah, even more. Um, yeah, so Frank's going to talk about this later. I wanted to mention it, but yeah, the general model was a sort of fee-for-service model, although heavily subsidized through grants we got through HCDC. Um, and the general funding that ULinks gets in order to support the project and have it be successful. Um, Kinesis was one of a number of lakes that we did last summer, but I would say that I mean, not even, yeah, this is clearly the reason that this happened at all is because of Kinesis and especially Jim. So I think that yeah, this wider survey that's now taking off in its second year, I think it goes to show the importance of having community champions and actors who are able to bring together organizations, with an impetus. So the survey results of the survey, having connections to other organizations and the will to move it forward. Yeah, I think, I really like Jim, and I think he's a great person that you have on your lake. And yeah, and yeah, this would never have happened without him bringing everybody together and facilitating things. Um, yeah, so the survey itself. So what we did in order to do this was we laid out a roughly 100-meter grid along the shoreline of the lake, and we went and sampled those points. So initially, I designed the survey for the much more productive lakes of the Kawarthas that I'm used to, where you get mucky bottoms everywhere, and the lakes are only like, you could barely, calling them a lake at times is a bit generous. Yeah, they're often 2 meters deep or less. And so initially I designed it as a rake toss survey where I can see in the bottom right there, Shelby, amazing field tech we had last year, is throwing the rake, this like a modified thatching rake into the water and pulling it back. But as we were doing that, most of the shoreline is just covered in rocks. And there's no plants underwater, and all the plants that are there, you can just see them by driving by the shoreline. And so after getting the rake stuck on rocks multiple times, and I think at one point Shelby had to jump in and dislodge the rake, we decided to switch to a binocular survey. Um, that was, yeah, much more. I mean, yeah, there was no plants to get in most of the locations around the lake, except for the back bays where we still did use the rake when we needed it. Yeah, but we would use binoculars and scan the shoreline instead. Um, One slide I forgot to include is our rating system. So when we would go by the points, we would note each plant that we saw, and then we would give it a relative abundance score. So on a scale of three to one. So three being it's dominant on the shoreline, there's lots of it. It's clearly one of the most important plants on the shoreline. Two being there's lots of it, but it's not dominant. We see it quite consistently, but it's not the dominant plant. And one being just that it's there to some extent, at least, even if there's just one. So I'll jump into the results. So some of the most common species that we saw along the shorelines and in the water were so one of them is called sweet gale or bog myrtle is another name for it. Yeah, so that was most common plant by far, in addition to various different rush species. We got better at identifying rushes as the summer went on, but I sort of generally lumped them together into one category just because they are their flowers are relatively inconspicuous and they're just straight and green generally. They do vary by height and you can tell them apart by color once you get better at them, but we sort of lump them all into one category. The next most common one was marsh speedwell, which in retrospect, we were doing this quite early. I think I misidentified, and I think it's actually um, swamp candles, which was ended up being one of the more common species that we saw throughout the later surveys along the shorelines. I think that makes more sense because we saw a lot of the speedwell on Kennisis, but nowhere else. So anyway, that's my thought on what it actually was. If it was speedwell, maybe it was, but I think it was swamp candles, which have these yeah, funny waxy bits that look like candles, and that's how you know what they are, which only appear later in the season. Next one we had was blue flag iris, which is, yeah, such a lovely plant to have so much of. I suspect that many of you have seen it along your shorelines because it was literally everywhere across the lake. Yeah, and then we had groups of sedges next. So yeah, so we got some three-way sedge. Although, yeah, three-way sedge was its own category. These were the sort of the smaller sedges. In terms of invasive species, Kennisis really did not have many invasive species. I saw some yellow flag iris in somebody's garden a little ways up their shoreline. I don't expect yellow flag iris to necessarily become a problem because unless it gets into the really mucky organic areas, it's not really going to like the sort of acidic nutrient poor shorelines. And otherwise, we saw no invasive aquatic plants along the shoreline of Kennisis. Maybe maybe if we had gone later in the season, we might have seen some purple loosestrife, I suspect, which would be a bit more conspicuous later on in the season. But otherwise, yeah, no, the Kennisis, in terms of submerged aquatic plants, certainly we didn't find any nor emergence. Yeah, although that being said, Phragmites is definitely on the way. Ulinks and Frank and others did a removal near the Kennisis Lake Marina. You guys do that last summer or the summer before? Or both? Both.
Both, both.
Both. Yeah. Yeah. So Phragmites is certainly on the way. Although I think one important thing to note is that during our survey, so when Jason was doing the survey of burdock, he did find some native Phragmites. And so being able to tell the difference between the two is important because, yeah, there is a native Phragmites australis that we have here. So same species, but different subspecies. And so there are resources online that you can use to tell them apart. But yeah, I think it is interesting and important to note that, yeah, there is a native Phragmites as well, native common reed. that yeah, it's important to look out for. Um, yeah, so of 676 points that we surveyed, we found one point that had yeah, yellow flag iris of all of those, and at that it was in somebody's garden, and I don't necessarily expect it to become a problem. Um, some of the interesting native plants that we've got here. So I was doing a presentation at the Halliburton Forest the other day, and yeah, I think it's like I was got a presentation by Professor at Trent, Jim Schaefer. He's talking about sort of academic blind spots where you study something for so long you don't realize that people may not know things about what you study. And so I was like, I showed a slide of some of the plants that we found that I thought were interesting, and one of them I pointed out was, does anybody know that we have carnivorous plants that grow in our lakes? I mean, I suspect Andrea Kirkwood knows that. Um, uh, Andrea, do you have a cottage on Kennesis, or are you just here for the aquatic plants?
Oh, yes, I have a cottage.
Oh, really? Um, we have another. You have another aquatic plant expert on your lake, more so than me, I think. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. So yeah, you have actually the bladderworts are the largest group of at least aquatic carnivorous plants. I think maybe just carnivorous plants in general. I think there's over 200 species of bladderworts in across the world, but yeah, they're quite a fascinating plant. We found three in the water, and I suspect, yeah, I mean, I think based on the naturalist observations, there's at least another one there that's on the shoreline called horned bladderwort. Yeah, they're quite an interesting set of plants. They're adapted to low nutrient environments, like many carnivorous plants. Like you'll find sundews and bogs, because they live in those low nutrient environments, or maybe it allowed them to live there. Eating generally invertebrates and other small animals, but generally invertebrates, allows them to have another source of nutrients so that they can live in these very stressful environments, and then they don't have to compete with other things. So it's quite an interesting adaptation. And they also have bladderworts in particular, so they have these little bladders that grow along their stalk and leaves, and although sometimes they're separated, but they can also host an interesting microbiome of symbiotic like bacteria and algae that they can also derive other nutrients from. Yeah, so it's quite an interesting set of organisms. Um, Water milfoils. Has anybody heard of Eurasian water milfoil? You can put your hands up in the chat. Um, I think what a lot of people don't know, perhaps, is that we have at least five. Actually, I think there's six other native milfoils that you might expect in and around Kinesis. One of which I didn't put on here, called Farwell's water milfoil. But yeah, we have native milfoils, and so I think this also speaks to the importance of being able to tell the difference between all the plants that you share the lake with, because you might think that, oh, look, and if you called it an expert, they'd be able to tell you pretty quickly if it was Eurasian water milfoil or not. But you know, um, there's all these other milfoils that can look quite similar to Eurasian water milfoil, and one of which even hybridizes with it. So we have a native northern water milfoil that hybridizes with Eurasian water milfoil, and there's a a native milfoil weevil that we use for biocontrol of Eurasian water milfoil, that whose host is the native northern water milfoil, but also loves to eat the hybrid in the Eurasian water milfoil as well. Yeah, and so I think, yeah, being able to tell the difference between, or at least being aware that there are these other milfoils, can go a long way in terms of looking out for your lake. I think one good example of one interesting outcome of our survey this year was, we did a survey of Lipsey, and immediately after we finished the survey, it was like the day after we finished the survey, or a couple days after, the lake steward contacted us back and was like, "Hey, somebody is developing the shoreline and ripping out plants. They're saying it's purple loosestrife. Did you guys find any?" And we said, absolutely not. We think it's probably they're pulling a pickerel weed, right? And so, I think often invasive species get used as a justification for shoreline development sometimes, or yeah, or pulling out plants beside docks, whatever. And so if you're interested in protecting the shoreline, being able to say, hey, I think that's actually, let's hold on here. There's other things going on. Maybe that's not invasive. Yeah, it can be a big way to communicate to people that, there's value to these plants in the lake, and, not all these things are invasive. Yeah. I think another interesting feature of Kennisis, among other of the shield lakes, is yeah, like these sandbar ecosystems. Like you come to places in the lake, usually close to the shore, but sometimes maybe close to like rocky shoals in the middle of like where you'll see these little plants sticking out close to the surface in the sandy areas. Um, where the water is very clear and is quite shallow and yeah, so there's a whole set of plants that are specially adapted to growing in sand, the really sandy, nutrient poor soils, or substrates, I guess, since they're underwater, in those shallow areas. And some of those are so one of them, which is a milfoil, which doesn't really look like a milfoil if you are tuned to such things, is called slender water milfoil. Sort of looks like some sort of inconspicuous grass, despite the fact that it's not. It's the one that's further to the left here. Then we have pipewort, which has like sends up a little tube, like a pipe coming out of the water, and it's got a little button on top. You've probably seen those before. Water lobelia, which has this quite nice flower. I don't know if anybody's seen cardinal flower before, but it's the same genus. So you notice that if you pay close attention to like great blue lobelia or yeah, or cardinal flower or other lobelias, it has a similar flower shape. So this one's called water lobelia. And then we got over on the right side there, we got quillwort, of which I think there's 5 or 6 species of these. One of which is a species at risk, that actually the only known populations that we have. One of the 2 of those populations grows under the bridge in West Guilford. Um, yeah, and so yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna talk about that one a bit more later. But anyway, and then we got some needle spike rush, which is a small little rush that likes growing on the shoreline. Um, yeah, I think another interesting observation that came out of the study was, how I mean the shield lakes are a bit new to me, and so noticing that, yeah, the diversity is so low in a lot of the big lakes, especially in the exposed areas, is that it seems like, but there's a high diversity in those sheltered areas where there's more potential for muck accumulation, sediment accumulation, is the effect of wave action on shoreline species richness, plant species richness. I don't have the ability to do, maybe I could, if I got some fetch values and whatnot, to do some sort of analysis on, yeah, the effect of wave action on plant diversity. But there's a pretty clear causal mechanism there where waves stir up sediment and prevent sediment from establishing, especially near those deeper areas, those rocky shorelines. But I think the thing that it makes me think about is you know thinking about human impacts to the lake is the effect of wake on shoreline communities. I not now there's a lot of natural fetch that will hit those shorelines anyway because Kennisis is quite a big lake, and you're going to get lots of natural shoreline wave action anyway. But a study recently done in the Muskoka Lakes found that, and Muskokas are different. There's a different sort of set of social demographics going on there in terms of, cottage ownership and who goes there and what they tend to do and whatnot. But finding that 66% of the wave energy in a lot of those big Muskoka lakes, like bays, so on, so like Muskoka, was caused by human activity. And so, yeah, I think it makes me wonder to the degree to which, yeah, there could potentially be more diversity on some of the shorelines, especially some of the bigger lakes. Especially when we're comparing it to some of the smaller lakes like Lipsey, where we're consistently seeing quite high diversity numbers all the way around the lake, um, probably as a consequence of not much wave action. But I'm going backwards. Oh, oh no. Right, there we go. Yeah, but it's just I think it's another interesting thing to think about in terms of yeah, what we can do to yeah, to make the shoreline ecosystems on our lakes even healthier and more rich. Um, yeah, I think that brings me to the talking about the hotspots. So yeah, those hotspots were those shelter secluded areas like the Soap Pond or Bullfrog Bay or
Patty's
what's it?
Patty's Bay.
Patty's Bay. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, where there's possible for sediment to accumulate. Yeah, so some of the plants that we'd see there that we wouldn't see elsewhere, a lot of these like floating leaved emergent plants or floating leaf plants, they're emerging, but they're not what we would call emergent necessarily. Yeah, the pond weeds, so the plants you can see in the top left, things like tape grass and slender water naiad. So these plants that need to establish roots on the bottom. Um, yeah, and I think you can sort of think about. I think one way I've thought about like water lilies in particular because they form these massive tuber systems underneath the water, sort of as the sort of climax ecosystem of aquatic plant environments because they tend to live in low flow areas where they can establish their tuber systems without being disturbed. And so they can, they establish quite a long lifespan where in the absence of disturbance, just like in a mature sugar maple forest, you're going to get these yeah, often lily dominated systems where it's shallow, it's deep enough where they're not going to get overtaken by emergence, but they can still flourish by establishing their tuber systems. I think another interesting one to look at here is the little floating heart. So there is an invasive floating heart, which is this is not, this is native. When I saw this, I went, "Oh my God, we got floating heart in the lake," because this is not one we'd see in the Kawarthas, but looking up, it's like, "Oh, okay, this is native." Yeah. So anyway, another interesting one. Um, so in terms of the shoreline, some of the common plants that we'd see are things like sensitive fern. Yeah, it's a plant that doesn't like to be spoken to sternly. It tends to wilt. Just kidding. Swamp candles, jewelweed, also called spotted touch-me-nots, because when the seed capsules are ready, you can touch them and make them explode, and they catapult and send their seeds like this. Swamp aster and bog aster, sweet gale, which we already talked about, and foul manna grass. So some of the more common shoreline plants. Um, and we have some emergence. So two different species of cattails, broadleafed and narrow-leafed cattail, I think. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. We have broadleafed arrowhead, although this picture isn't superb because the leaves are not very broad. Sometimes it looks like this. Yeah, actually, a lot of them look like this in Kennisis, despite the fact that their leaves are narrow. It is technically broad-leaved arrowhead. Pickerel weed, which is the pink, the bluish pink one there, at the top third one from the left on the top. Northern mannagrass, large fruited burrweed, blue flag iris, and three-way sedge. And it's called three-way sedge because it goes three ways. It goes like this. Not grid demonstration on a 2D screen, I think. Yeah, it's three-dimensional. Um, uh, um, yeah. So, moving on from sort of the highlights of some of the stuff we saw on the shoreline. This is a thing to think about or points for contemplation that came up to me in this was, yeah, like opportunities of the outcome of the survey, where to go next and things to think about. I think one possibly cool project is to think about, is there possible habitat for Engelmann's quillwort in any of the lakes? That would probably require collaboration with some other agencies and whatnot, but be a cool project because we only know that there's two places in Ontario where this is. Now, granted, in order to tell quillworts apart, you have to use uh like a I think it's quite a high powered microscope, not just like a handheld microscope, but one that gets you like really, really, really highly detailed imagery in order to look at the spores to tell them apart by species. But yeah, given that we only know that it's two places, and it's very close by. It's on the way to Kennisis Lake. Yeah, I think there might be some interesting potential to do some quillwort restoration in the region. Engelmann's quillwort specifically. Yeah, again, thinking about the effective wave action on aquatic plant communities, I know Environment in Haliburton recently had one of their talks on the previous Saturday about wake boats. I wanted to go, but I couldn't because I had to be in Peterborough. Um, but yeah, I think the wake boat thing is definitely becoming a much bigger complication, and as a consequence, wave action effect on shorelines. And so I think it's another interesting point to consider. To what degree does wave action, have a significant impact on shaping shorelines and plant communities that we have? I think another thing to think about, which I'll talk about in a second, is shoreline naturalization. I think another thing. So this is on Cashobog Lake. I was talking with a guy I was staying with there while I was doing some research on famwort numbers of summers ago. Is and I think this is a phenomenon that's occurred across cottage lakes. Is when cottages get built, especially in the early days, what people tend to do is clear the nearshore area of downwoody debris in order to clear it for swimming or their boat or whatever. Understandable. But one of the effects of that is number one, loss of fish habitat and as well as macroinvertebrate habitat and whatnot, as well as plant habitat. So all these like bog logs where you'll find like these little miniature bogs or other plants from different ecosystems growing along the top of them. And I suspect, the Cross Ontario and Cottage Lakes is because it's a consistent loss of downward debris along the shorelines. And so what that means is also there's a massive potential to to put that in where it's possible and to increase the diversity of the plant communities and fish, yeah, and fish and other organismal diversity within our aquatic environments. And it's not that hard to do. You just need to throw some, in the right place. But throwing logs in, maybe it does require a bit more thought than that. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity to increase shoreline diversity and ecosystem health within our lakes. Yeah, and then also thinking about Phragmites is on the way. I think it's also important to think about what we want in those spaces next. So the digging them out is, probably allows for natural succession to occur afterwards. But yeah, we know Phragmites is definitely on the way to Kennisis, and so continuing to keep an eye out for it is good and taking part in removal actions. So in terms of some wonderful shoreline plants for your shorelines, if you so I Jim took me out. Jim took me out on a number of occasions, took all of us out on a number of occasions in order to do the surveys because we relied on other people in order to take us along. But I think one wonderful opportunity, especially if you have a south-facing exposed rock on your property. So if you're on the north side of the lake and have some south-facing exposed granite, are enriching it with some wonderful native plants. Yeah, and some of those you might want to think about are rock harlequin, which is this wonderful pink flower on the bottom left, poverty oats, which is this nice looking grass that's on the bottom second from the left. Early saxifrage and red columbine on the bottom right there, and bearberry on the top right. I know that Abbey Gardens grows these things as well as Baz Conlon. And as part of my work with ULinks and the Land Trust this summer and the KLCOA, we're going to be doing some native plant seed collection on Norris Island, and we will be collecting most of these. And maybe if I ask nicely, I can steal some early saxifrage and red columbine from Jim's house, which I know grow there. Yes. Yeah. And so, yeah, just if some of these aren't present on your granite barrens that are next to your shoreline, just if maybe we can get you some seed and we can come to your house and put some in on your shoreline, in the crevices and increase the native plant diversity on your shoreline. One person I'd like to particularly thank is Jason Smileris. So when my back was not able to continue doing this project, he did this plant survey I did all of Kennisis, but on some of the other lakes. This guy is wonderful. And if you're looking for a field assistant or someone to work with you or someone to hire to do a botanical survey or as an environmental scientist, this guy is great. Um, Also, if you're interested in local plants, learning more about local plants this summer, um, I work for as I said, I work for the Halliburton Highland Land Trust. I'm running some regular events on Sundays that generally will involve native plant seed collection, among other things, at the Land Trust. And we'll also be doing the Norris Island Seed Collection Project. And I don't know, maybe I'll have to talk to Sam and Frank and Jim and Scott. But maybe we can bring some other people along if they're interested in learning more about what's going on there. Yeah, and that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Nick. That was wonderful. I think we could probably pause for. Actually, I'm going to put a couple slides up, and then we'll pause for questions or anything that came in by chat as well. So let me share again. And by the way, those land trust events have been advertised in our recent e-blast. So for folks that get the e-blast, you'll be able to look on the e-blast and find out a little bit more about those events. Okay, circling back to a lot of the stuff that Nick said about priorities and looking after our lake and about the water quality and what we value the most. Again, our survey said 99% of respondents said maintaining our excellent water quality is very important or important. And there are ways that we can do that. This invasive species is one piece of the larger puzzle. So what can we do to maintain our good water quality? Keep our shorelines natural. Great points from Nick on that. Managing our septic systems properly, that's the source of nutrients in our lakes to keep them from getting nutrient rich. Eliminating the use of fertilizers and pesticides. Those native plants that Nick talked about don't need fertilizers and pesticides, that's for sure. And the last one's keeping invasive species out of the Kennisis Lakes. And how might we do that? Clean drain dryer boats is probably the most effective way for most of the transfer. No aquarium plants at the lake at all. No dumping anything from aquariums in the lake. There's a project going on in Ontario about that now. But this is a little bit of a warning and concern. So if you look at on the top map at the top right there, the Kennisis, see where we are at the Kennisis Lakes and then Dragon Spruce. Dragon spruce have had a really severe infestation of Eurasian water milfoil. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in trying to mitigate. And there are places as big as our Marina Bay, which are full of Eurasian water milfoil that watercraft cannot traverse. Basically, the prop gets plugged up, and then it chops up the Eurasian water milfoil, and they become more prolific. So dragon spruce have had that for a while. It's an invasive aquatic. It was almost certainly brought in by a boat as a vector, as a rider on some type of watercraft. They've used mitigation techniques like laying weighted burlap maps, harvesting the EWM using divers, and they're very costly and have been marginally effective. Living with it may be the only option, which is tough. If you're in a bay and it gets full of Eurasian water milfoil, the water becomes really different than you expected when maybe you purchased your property. We do have locations on the Kennisis Lakes that would sustain Eurasian water milfoil, but one of the primary reasons for doing that survey last year was to see whether we had any Eurasian water milfoil, and we do not, which is a good thing. Again, the best defense is clean, drain, dry. And this presentation will be posted later, but there's a great Dragon Spruce Lake video about the Eurasian water milfoil problem and mitigation. And yeah, I would encourage you to watch it. Eric Sauger that Nick talked about, he's featured in that video as well. He's one of the profs from Trent that we work with. So I'm going to pause and not share for a second and see if we have any questions from the audience. And we haven't put anybody on mute, so perhaps just hands up and ask any questions if you wish. Or Frank or Nick or any of us. My God, we have a quiet lot tonight.
There's nothing in chat right now either.
Yeah. Andrew, you must have a question. Or even a comment would be welcome.
Yeah.
Hi, sorry, I'm kind of in transit. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yep.
can,
Okay,
Andrea.
sorry. I'm at a community center. My daughter has a dance recital coming up. So okay, great. The internet isn't great where I am, so sorry if I'm cutting out, but that was a really great talk, Dick. I just would just comment that yeah, Phragmites is definitely around the lake on the road. I've seen a few patches. You can just go to iNaturalist and you can see where people have identified it. So that worries me a lot because if that makes its way down to the shoreline, it can be really difficult to remove. Of course, you know, not all of the shoreline in Kennisis Lake is really hospitable to Phragmites, but there's certainly areas where it could get kind of entrenched. But other than that, I think this is wonderful educational opportunity for our lake is the crown jewel of Halliburton. It's a headwater lake. It's partly why it's being somewhat protected from getting invasive species. Invasive species, the number one vector are boats. So the whole clean, drain dry is so important. And hopefully we'll have big signage at the marina to really be kind of hardcore about keeping the invasive species out because that is the best management strategy is prevention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, Andrea happens to be on my road, and she's a prof at Ontario Tech as well, working in limnology and water quality, which is fabulous. Great to have Andrea on the lake. All right, I'm just going to do a couple more slides to wrap up then.
We're gonna try and do some more slides.
No.
No,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, in wrapping up, so just a reminder that the KLCOA owns 4 patches of land, and we partner with a large patch of land on the lake with the Halliburton Highlands Land Trust. Please come and enjoy those parcels. It's the Blueberry Islands, Bullfrog Bay, Tuloon Island, Soap Pond Lands, and Norris Island. Most of you know about them. Tread lightly, but please do tread this summer. As Nick said, we've got the project with on the seed bank collection for Nora's, and we're working on the possibility of a Nora's Island plus other land location visits. So still in progress. We have to work out boat transport and insurance and all that stuff, but we'll get that out by e-blast and on the website if that's going to happen. So finally, Nick and Frank, thank you very much. And to Deb and Karen in the background for all the organizing this and the tech stuff. Really appreciate you folks coming out on a June evening and keep an eye out for those plants. Oh, one other thing I forgot to say. The report for the for the aquatic plant inventory, we'll send a copy to everyone who registered tonight. It's a PDF copy. It's going to be posted on the website as well. And on the website, we'll send you links, or actually probably put them in the email, to some other resources, which are aquatic plant identification guides. A real nice one from North Kawartha. There's one from FOCA. And what's the other one? You remember, Frank? Anyway, there's 3 really good ones.
Kawartha Lake Steward Association.
Yeah, I think that's the one I was thinking of, the Kawartha Lakes one. Yeah, yeah. But we'll send links out to those. Those are great. And so the plants that Nick showed you in the slides today, you'll be able to. There's little keys to identifying each of them. So.
Yeah. Also, if you do want some of those, yeah, native plant species, if you have some suitable rock barrens that don't have some of those species present, yeah, love to come pay you a visit and put some seeds on your shoreline if you want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you could reach out to me directly for that, and I'll make sure you get put in touch with Nick, and he'll gently bring those seeds to you and put them in the right place.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Doing a regional seed collection program this summer is part of my job at HHLT. Sorry. Go on.
No, that's okay. There was one question here. It's just, would it be possible to include your Drag Lake slide with the video link in a future e-blast to highlight the need to clean boats, etc.?
We can do that, no problem.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Deb and I will
And,
remember to do that, just as a general message on Clean Drain Dry and a link to the video. Yep, absolutely.
and Scott, do you want me to read your post? Okay, so Scott Jury, our one of our KLCOA co-presidents, just says, thanks, Jim, Nick, and Frank. To quote Nick, Jim is a nice guy, and we at the KLCOA are lucky to have an ambassador like him. 23 projects with the support of ULinks is awesome. Our relationship with ULinks is invaluable, and thank you for all you've done for us. And I think we couldn't agree more with you, Nick.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, folks. Have a great evening.
Bye. Nice to meet you all.